The call came at 2:03 a.m., that hour when silence feels heavier than sound. I'd always feared late-night calls. They never bring good news, only the kind that can't wait until morning. "Mrs. Reynolds," the voice on the other end said, calm but urgent. "This is Mercy Hospital. Your son, James. He's been admitted. You need to come immediately." My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. "What happened?" I managed to ask, though part of me already knew. "A possible aneurysm," the nurse said gently. "Please hurry." The next few minutes blur together in fragments, fumbling for my keys, forgetting my shoes, the sound of rain tapping on the windshield as I drove through the empty streets. Every red light felt like an insult, every second a thief. I whispered his name the whole way. "Hold on, James, please, hold on." When I reached the hospital, the world seemed to move in slow motion. Fluorescent lights, the smell of antiseptic, the quiet shuffle of nurses who avoided my eyes. A doctor in blue scrubs met me at the entrance. His expression told me everything before he spoke. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Reynolds. It was massive. There was nothing anyone could have done." I stared at him, waiting for the rest, the part where they'd say he was stable or sedated or anything but gone. But no more words came. The corridor spun. The world just stopped. At 65, I thought I'd already faced life's worst loss when my husband passed 10 years ago. I was wrong. Losing a child isn't something any mother prepares for. It's like the air is ripped out of your lungs, and yet you're expected to breathe. I don't remember signing the papers, or how I found myself sitting alone in the waiting room with a paper cup of cold coffee in my hands. Hours passed before Sophia arrived, my daughter-in-law, James's wife of 10 years. Perfect hair, expensive coat, not a trace of tears. "There was traffic," she said softly, not meeting my eyes. "And I had to find someone to watch Lucas." Her voice sounded rehearsed, her sympathy too smooth. While I sat there shaking, she stood tall, composed, like someone handling an inconvenience rather than a tragedy. I wanted to believe it was shock. I wanted to. But something in her calmness didn't feel like grief. It felt like relief. I didn't know then that my son's final act of love would expose everything. Morning came like a mistake. I hadn't slept. I watched the sky shift from black to gray through the hospital window, as if daylight might return what the night had taken. Nurses moved quietly, wheels squeaked, doors sighed open and closed. I signed forms with a hand that didn't feel like mine. Next of kin, authorization, release. Words that belonged to someone else's life. They let me see him. The room was too clean for such a fact. Machines were already silent. I touched his forearm and told myself it was still warm. I said his name once, then again, because I was afraid if I stopped, the world would forget him in the same breathing space I did. I straightened the edge of his sheet. I smoothed a wrinkle in his pillow. Mothers do these small, useless things when there is nothing else left to do. By noon, I stood in a chapel that smelled faintly of wax and lilies. The hospital chaplain spoke softly. I heard comfort and peace and nothing in between. Sophia stood beside me, immaculate in a black coat that framed her like a photograph. Sunglasses pushed up on her hair, perfectly neutral face. When people approached, she leaned at the right angle, tilted her head, whispered the exact words people say when they've practiced saying them. "I can't believe it," she told a partner from James's firm, her voice tuned like a piano. "He was working last night. He seemed fine." To me, she said, "You must drink something." She placed a water bottle in my hand and then stepped away to answer her phone, head turned, hand over her mouth, as if privacy were compassion. When I called Lucas's school, the secretary's kindness broke something in me. "We'll keep him with Mrs. Haynes this afternoon," she said. "He'll be safe with his friend. We'll wait while you decide what to tell him." I thanked her. My voice sounded far away, like it was crossing a field in winter. At home that evening, the house felt crowded and empty at the same time. People brought food. They arranged casseroles like offerings on my kitchen counter, said they were sorry, said to call any time. I nodded, hugged, nodded again. Someone pressed napkins into my hands, and I realized I'd been holding the same tissue for an hour. The funeral came quickly, as if the calendar had tilted and everything slid into place without asking me. The church filled with faces from every square of James's life. Law firm partners in dark suits, neighbors clutching paper programs, college friends with softened edges and careful smiles. The choir sang a hymn that used to make him laugh when he was a boy, because the words sounded too heavy for human voices, he'd said. Now the weight felt right. Sophia arrived like a headline. Designer black dress, a veil that wasn't quite a veil, tear-proof mascara doing its silent work. She took my arm as we walked to the front pew, light as air, careful not to wrinkle the sleeve of my jacket. When she sat, she angled herself toward me just enough for a photograph. Once, twice, her head bowed. Perfect timing, perfect pose. I could feel the absence of weight against my shoulder. A touch designed for witnesses, not comfort. Lucas sat on my other side, small hands clenched around the program. He traced the letters of his father's name with a finger, jaw tight. When the choir began, he leaned into me without looking, the way he used to lean against his father during thunderstorms. I kept my arm around him and matched my breathing to his. When his shoulders shook, it was not for show. He pressed his face into my sleeve and his tears soaked through to my skin. I will never forget that feeling, warm, honest grief. People stood and told stories. A client James had helped keep her house. A young associate who said James taught him to say, "I don't know yet," without shame. His college roommate remembered a road trip that had ended with a flat tire and a kindness to a stranger that turned into a friendship. Each small piece built a picture I already knew but needed to hear from other mouths. My son was good. He didn't just do good things, he was good. Through it all, I watched Sophia the way you watch a candle to see if it will catch. She dabbed at dry cheeks with a monogrammed handkerchief. She accepted condolences with the exact grip and tilt, taught by someone who believes in the right performance for every room. When a wealthy client approached, her posture lifted. When James's childhood friend with an off-the-rack suit stepped forward, her smile thinned. I didn't accuse, I didn't even decide, I just noticed. After the service, in the small reception room with too many cookies and too little air, I poured juice for Lucas and listened to him ask questions that had no safe answers. Is Daddy sleeping? Can he hear me if I talk? I told him the truth in pieces he could carry. His body has stopped working. The love part doesn't stop. He nodded like a boy who wanted to believe me. He tucked the program into his pocket as if it were a passport. When he went to the corner to build a tower of plastic cups with a friend, I found myself alone at the coffee urn with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. A man touched my elbow, Thomas Bennett, the friend who'd become James's attorney. His eyes were red-rimmed, his mouth a straight line of someone holding himself together for later. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "I'm so sorry." "Thank you," I said, because there are only so many words available to mourners, and we had reached the end of them. He hesitated, as if searching for the least cruel way to place one more stone on my day. "When you feel ready," he added, voice low, "we should meet. There are matters in James's will that need timely attention." I looked past him to where Sophia stood, laughing softly at something a tall, expensively dressed man had said. Her hand rested on his, sleeve a fraction too long. She felt my eyes and turned, smile snapping into the proper shape. I set down the coffee I hadn't tasted. The room brightened and narrowed at the same time, like a camera choosing a subject. But amid the condolences, one sentence from my son's lawyer changed everything. The following morning, the house felt too quiet for a place filled with flowers. Their sweet, heavy scent clung to the air like grief that refused to leave. I spent hours pretending to tidy, folding napkins that were already folded, aligning picture frames that didn't need straightening. Anything to avoid the hollow truth echoing in the hallway. James wasn't coming home. By noon, the phone rang. It was Thomas Bennett. "Eleanor," he said gently, "I know this is soon, but James's will needs to be read today. He made specific arrangements that require immediate attention." His tone carried something under the sympathy, urgency. I agreed to come. Sophia insisted on meeting me there, arriving in a polished black sedan that matched her polished composure. She wore another black outfit, expensive but understated, as if to announce she was still the grieving widow. Just one who understood luxury. Her sunglasses hid her eyes, though the rest of her face was perfectly visible. Thomas's office sat on the top floor of a sandstone building downtown. The blinds were half closed, softening the afternoon light that fell across rows of legal binders. The air smelled faintly of coffee and paper. We sat opposite each other at his desk, me with trembling hands folded in my lap, Sophia sitting straight-backed, her phone face down but within reach. Thomas cleared his throat. "This won't take long," he said, "but there are some provisions I think will come as a surprise." He opened a thick envelope marked "Last Will and Testament of James Reynolds." My heart clenched at the sight of my son's handwriting on the label. "Per James's instructions," Thomas began, "the lake house property, his investment portfolio, and the life insurance policy are left to his wife, Sophia Reynolds." Sophia nodded slowly, lips pressed in a practiced line of grief-tinged gratitude. "But," Thomas continued, turning the page, "the family home at 1742 Oakwood Drive, both vehicles, and the personal bank account at a First National are to be inherited by his mother, Eleanor Reynolds." For a moment, the room went still. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hesitate. Sophia's head snapped up. "I'm sorry, what?" Thomas repeated the line, his tone calm but firm. The home, the cars, and the bank account now belonged to Mrs. Reynolds. I felt my breath catch. The home where James had raised Lucas. The home I'd only ever visited on holidays. "That must be a mistake," Sophia said quickly. "We bought that house together. It's our marital property." Thomas slid a document across the desk. "It was purchased solely in James's name before your marriage. It was never converted to joint ownership." Sophia's composure cracked just slightly. A tightness around the eyes, a tremor at the corner of her mouth. But she recovered fast. "That can't be right. He would have told me if he made changes." He updated his will 3 months ago, Thomas replied. Everything was legally executed and witnessed. 3 months ago. The words landed like cold water. Around that time, James had seemed distracted, tired. He'd brought Lucas over more often for sleepovers. I thought he'd just needed a break from work. Now I realized it had been something else entirely. Sophia leaned forward, voice honeyed but sharp underneath. James and I discussed our plans together. This isn't what he would have wanted. I can only present what he signed, Thomas said, closing the folder. There's one more item, though. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a smaller envelope. My name was written on it in James's handwriting. Steady, precise, unmistakable. He asked that this be given to you privately, Thomas said. He wanted you to read it when you were ready. I took it with shaking hands. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Sophia noticed, eyes narrowing slightly. What's that? Thomas replied before I could. A personal letter. It isn't part of the official will. Sophia forced a small smile. Of course, how thoughtful of him. Her fingers tapped against her phone, nails clicking in a slow rhythm that betrayed her irritation. When the meeting ended, she was first to stand. I'll have my lawyer review everything, she said coolly. I'm sure we'll sort this out soon, for Lucas's sake. For Lucas's sake, I echoed quietly. She left without another glance, heels clicking down the hallway, like a metronome counting down to whatever came next. Thomas waited until the sound faded. Eleanor, he said softly, there's more to this than property. Read the letter when you're alone. James wanted you to understand why he did what he did. I nodded, clutching the envelope to my chest. Outside, the sky had turned an unsettled gray. As I walked to my car, I could still feel Sophia's perfume lingering faintly in the air, something expensive, floral, and cold. My son had changed his will only 3 months before his death. And now he was speaking to me from beyond the grave, through the paper pressed between my shaking hands. My son knew she'd fight dirty, and he'd armed me for it. I didn't open the envelope right away. It sat on my kitchen table all afternoon, untouched between a vase of wilting lilies and an untouched cup of tea. Every time I reached for it, something inside me resisted. Maybe I was afraid that whatever my son had written would make his death feel final, that reading his words would turn memory into goodbye. When the house grew quiet and the daylight softened to gold, I finally gave in. I drew the curtains closed, turned off my phone, and slid my finger under the seal. His handwriting filled the page in blue ink, familiar, neat, deliberate. Mom, if you're reading this, the unthinkable has happened. I'm sorry to leave you with so much pain, but there are things you need to know. Things I couldn't say while I was alive. My vision blurred after the first line. I blinked hard and kept reading. You always said love makes us see clearly. I wanted to believe that. But somewhere along the way, I stopped recognizing the woman I married. What began as small lies turned into something darker. Plans I wasn't supposed to hear. Money I wasn't supposed to question. I've tried to protect Lucas quietly, to buy time, to gather proof. I felt my breath catch. Proof. The word pulsed off the page. Sophia has become someone I can't trust with our son. I've changed my will, and I've arranged certain safeguards. Thomas knows what to do if anything happens to me. But Mom, there's more. Don't confront her. Watch, record, protect Lucas. She's manipulative, and she's clever enough to twist sympathy into a weapon. I'm afraid that if she thinks you suspect her, she'll act before you can stop her." My hand shook as I turned the page. I could almost hear his voice, steady, logical, tinged with quiet regret. "I hate asking you to carry this burden. You should never have to. But there's no one I trust more. You taught me to think before I act, to stay calm when others panic. Lucas needs that now. Be kind to him. Keep him close. Let him believe in the best parts of both his parents. But if Sophia ever puts him at risk, you'll know what to do." Tears finally came, slow, unstoppable. I pressed the page to my chest as if I could somehow hold him again through it. For the first time since the phone call, I cried, not out of shock, but out of understanding. My son hadn't just died. He had foreseen something, prepared for it. And now I was part of the plan. I read the final lines twice. "Whatever happens, know that I love you. Everything I've done is for Lucas, and for you. I hope you never need this letter, but if you do, trust your instincts. They've always been stronger than you believe. Love, James." The ink had smudged slightly near his signature, as if a single drop of water, or maybe a tear, had fallen before it dried. I sat there for a long time, the paper trembling in my hands. The words had changed everything. The grief that had pinned me down for days began to shift into something sharper. Not anger, clarity. My son had known danger was coming, and he'd chosen me to stand guard. Outside, the evening wind moved through the trees, gentle but persistent. Somewhere down the street, a child laughed, a sound that made me think of Lucas. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into an envelope marked "For Lucas when he's ready." Then I tucked the original inside my coat pocket. Grief had given me nothing to do but survive. Now I had a purpose. I wiped my tears, straightened the stack of papers on the table, and whispered into the quiet house, "I'll protect him, James, I promise." I turned off the kitchen light and stood in the dark for a moment, steadying my breath. I wasn't just a grieving mother anymore. I was his witness. It was 3 days after the funeral when Sophia showed up unannounced. The doorbell rang just as I was folding Lucas's school sweater, the one he'd left behind on his last visit. Through the frosted glass, I could see her outline, tall, poised, a silhouette too composed for someone who'd just buried her husband. When I opened the door, she greeted me with a practiced smile. "Eleanor," she said softly, her voice carrying a note of rehearsed warmth. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," I replied, forcing my own voice to stay calm. "Come in." She stepped inside, her heels clicking on the tile. Her perfume was expensive, floral, and faintly suffocating. "I thought we should talk," she continued, setting her designer bag on the table as if she owned the air around it. "It's been a hard week for both of us. I think James would want us to find peace." "Peace," I repeated, motioning for her to sit. "That's always a good thing." She smiled again, that same careful curve of lips that never quite reached her eyes. "You've been through so much, Eleanor. I can't imagine what it's like to lose a child. I don't want you to worry about anything. I'll make sure you're taken care of." It was such a strange thing to say, especially to the woman whose son had left her the house, the cars, and the money. But I kept my expression gentle. "That's very kind of you, dear." She crossed her legs, leaning forward slightly, tone turning silky. "Actually, that's part of why I came. I spoke with an attorney, and it seems there's been some confusion with the will. The house, it was our home after all, the one Lucas grew up in. I'm sure James would have wanted it to stay that way. I nodded slowly, as though trying to understand. So you believe the will was wrong? Not wrong, exactly. She tilted her head. Just not what he truly intended. He wasn't himself near the end. Stressed, distracted. Maybe he forgot to update certain details. I folded my hands in my lap and looked down, letting a small silence stretch between us. In that quiet, she took the opening. I've already started looking into transferring the deed back into my name, she continued. It's really just a formality. We can avoid any unnecessary legal battles this way. Lucas shouldn't have to see us fighting. I lifted my gaze and met hers. That's thoughtful of you, but I wouldn't want to do anything without understanding the paperwork first. I'll need to speak with Thomas. Her smile tightened. Of course, though you know how lawyers can be. They love to complicate things that should be simple. We're family, Eleanor. We don't need lawyers between us. Family, I echoed softly. Yes, we are. Her tone brightened, sensing progress that wasn't there. Exactly. So if you'd just sign the transfer forms once I have them drawn up, I can handle the rest. You'll still have access anytime you want to visit Lucas. Nothing changes, really. It was almost impressive, the smoothness of her manipulation, the way she coded greed with civility. I wondered how many times she'd practiced this speech in front of a mirror. Would you like some tea? I asked suddenly, interrupting her rhythm. The question seemed to throw her. Tea? Yes, I said pleasantly, already standing. Chamomile or mint? She hesitated, then forced a small laugh. Chamomile's fine. As I prepared it, I thought about James's letter. Don't confront her. Watch, record, protect Lucas. The words steadied me. When I returned with the teacup, she was already scrolling through her phone, her mask slipping just enough to reveal the irritation beneath. You must miss him terribly, I said, setting the cup down. I do, she said automatically. He was my partner in everything. Even the house? I asked lightly. Her eyes flicked up sharply. For a second, she said nothing, and I saw the truth, something cold behind the smile. But then it was gone. Of course, she said smoothly. Everything we built together. I nodded and sipped my tea. Then I'm sure you'll understand why I want to think before making any decisions. Grief does strange things to memory. She studied me, perhaps trying to decide whether I was naive or simply slow. I understand, she said finally, standing. Just don't take too long. The house needs stability, for Lucas's sake. For Lucas, I repeated. Always. She gathered her things, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror before leaving. For a brief moment, her face went blank. No sorrow, no affection, only calculation. When the door closed behind her, I exhaled. My hands were steady. I walked to the window and watched her car pull away, the taillights fading into the dusk. She thought she'd planted a seed, that I'd spend the night doubting, worrying, softening. But James had warned me who she was, and now I knew exactly how to play her game. She thought she'd fooled me. She had no idea the game had already begun. The next morning, an envelope slid through my mail slot. Plain, unmarked, no return address. For a moment, I thought it was just another sympathy card. But when I picked it up, it felt different, heavy, intentional. My stomach tightened before I even opened it. Inside were several documents neatly clipped together and a short note written in Thomas Bennett's familiar hand. James asked me to pass this along when the time was right. Read it privately. Destroy nothing. I locked the door, drew the curtains, and sat at the kitchen table. The pages trembled in my hands as I spread them out. Printed emails, call logs, credit card statements, and something that looked like a hotel invoice from Miami. Each page was a piece of truth I didn't want, but could no longer ignore. The first set of phone logs showed late-night calls between Sophia and a number saved as R. Miller. The times lined up too perfectly. Minutes after James's messages went unanswered. Hours after he'd sent, "Are you still out?" or "Please call me." Then came the texts, screenshots with her contact name at the top, messages she clearly hadn't realized James had recovered from the cloud. "Richard, can't wait to see you again. Same hotel, same room?" "Sophia, you know I can't stay long, he's starting to suspect." "Richard, then make him believe you still love him. You're good at that." I felt the blood drain from my face, my hand pressed to my mouth before the sob could escape. My son, my gentle, patient James, had known all of this, and he'd carried it alone. There were receipts, too, 3-star hotels masked as business expenses, dinners for two in places she'd told me she'd never been, even credit card charges for jewelry that I'd never seen her wear. Every detail was neat, chronological, undeniable. James hadn't been paranoid, he'd been preparing. At the bottom of the pile was a small USB drive taped to a note that read, "Surveillance footage, March 18th. I turned on my laptop, my heart pounding so hard it made the keys shake. The video loaded, a silent clip from their living room camera. James sat on the couch, staring at the floor. Sophia stood across from him, arms crossed, lips moving sharply. I couldn't hear her words, but her gestures said enough. He said something back, something pleading, and she turned away, laughing. Then she picked up her phone, typed quickly, and moments later smiled at the screen. It wasn't the act itself that broke me. It was his expression afterward. The quiet defeat. The realization that love wasn't enough to save what he'd built. I paused the video and closed the laptop. My chest felt tight, as if I were breathing through glass. Grief had already hollowed me out, but this was something different. It was the slow burning ache of betrayal. I wanted to hate her, to despise every breath she took, but another part of me mourned the years my son had spent loving, someone who saw him as disposable. I pressed my palms against the table and whispered, "You didn't deserve this, James." The clock ticked, the refrigerator hummed. Life continued, cruelly ordinary. After a while, I gathered every page, placed them back in the envelope, and locked them in the bottom drawer of my desk. Then I sat in silence, staring at the last line of his letter, still echoing in my mind. Protect Lucas. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about grief. It was about keeping his promise alive. I knew Sophia wouldn't stop. People like her never did. They only changed tactics when they realized they were being watched, so I would watch, quietly, patiently. James had gathered the evidence, laid the groundwork, and trusted me with it. Now it was my turn. He gathered proof before he died. My job was to finish what he started. The weeks after the Miami trip felt heavier, like the air in the house had changed. Lucas no longer laughed the way he used to. He hesitated before speaking, as if every word needed permission. His teacher called one morning, her voice lined with concern. "Mrs. Reynolds, I just wanted to ask if everything is all right at home. Lucas has missed several assignments, and Sophia hasn't responded to our messages." I closed my eyes for a moment. He's been staying with his mother more lately. I'll make sure it's handled. But it wasn't just school. There were other signs, small, ordinary details that added up to something wrong. Lucas arriving with unwashed clothes, complaining of going to bed hungry. Once, he whispered that Mommy's friend Richard stayed over a lot, and that they fought when they thought he was asleep. Each time, I took notes in a small leather journal. Dates, times, what he said, what I saw. I wasn't gathering gossip. I was building proof, quietly, carefully, just as James had asked me to. One Friday, I arrived early at Lucas's school to pick him up. The teacher pulled me aside. "He came to school without lunch again," she said softly. "We gave him something from the cafeteria, but this is becoming a pattern." When Sophia showed up 30 minutes later, she looked annoyed rather than embarrassed. "I told him to pack it himself," she said sharply. "He's old enough to remember." "He's 8, I replied, keeping my tone even. She rolled her eyes. "Children need responsibility, Eleanor. You spoil him. That's why he's so dependent." I said nothing, but the teacher's frown said enough. That night, Lucas stayed with me. He ate 2 helpings of pasta and fell asleep on the couch, clutching his stuffed dog. I covered him with a blanket and sat nearby, the glow from the lamp washing the room in soft gold. My phone buzzed, a message from Thomas. "Call me when you can. Keller's found more." The next morning, I met Thomas and Keller at his office. Keller handed me a slim folder. "We've recorded 3 domestic disturbance calls from neighbors in the past month," he said. "Arguments between Sophia and Richard. None resulted in arrests, but it's enough to raise flags." Inside the folder were photos. Richard's car parked overnight at Sophia's house. Timestamps proving it overlapped with weekends Lucas was home. There were also school reports, messages left unanswered, medical appointments she'd missed. Thomas exhaled slowly. "Eleanor, this is a pattern of neglect. With what we already have, I can file for an emergency custody review. Are you ready for that?" My fingers tightened around the folder. "I'm not ready," I said quietly, "but I'll do it." The following week was a blur of signatures, affidavits, and whispered consultations. I didn't understand all the legal language, but I didn't need to. I understood the stakes. Every morning, I reminded myself, this isn't about winning, it's about protecting him. The hearing was held on a gray Tuesday morning. The courtroom felt smaller than I expected. Just a judge, 2 attorneys, and the weight of everything we'd lost. Sophia arrived in a tailored cream suit, her hair perfect, expression soft and composed. She looked every bit the grieving widow, the devoted mother. When her lawyer spoke, he painted her as a woman trying to rebuild her life. "She's faced unimaginable loss," he said smoothly. "She's doing her best." Thomas rose, calm but firm. "Your Honor, we don't question her grief, but we do question her priorities. What kind of mother leaves an 8-year-old alone in a hotel room? Misses parent-teacher meetings? Invites a lover to live in the home of a recently deceased husband?" Sophia's composure cracked, just slightly. "Those are exaggerations," she snapped. "You're twisting everything." The judge raised a hand for silence. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said to me, "do you wish to say anything?" I stood, my palms trembling, but my voice steady. "Your Honor, my son trusted me to care for his child. I'm not here to take Lucas away from his mother. I'm here to make sure he's safe, fed, and loved. If that means more time with me, then I'm willing to do whatever it takes." The room fell silent. The judge studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Temporary custody will remain with the mother for now. But Mrs. Reynolds, you'll be granted visitation rights every weekend and will conduct a home evaluation. You have 60 days to provide evidence of any further concerns. I felt the air rush out of me, not victory, but relief. 60 days, a window, a chance. Sophia turned to me as we left the courtroom, her eyes cold, her smile thin. "You're wasting your time, Eleanor," she murmured. "You'll never win." I met her gaze and said softly, "It's not about winning, it's about Lucas." Outside, the sky had begun to clear, sunlight breaking through the gray. I clutched the court papers to my chest, feeling my heartbeat steady for the first time in weeks. The judge saw what my son had seen and gave me 60 days to prove it. The court's decision changed something in Sophia. For weeks, she kept her distance, short texts, polite smiles, the occasional forced conversation at handovers. But beneath the surface, something was cracking. You could see it in the way her jaw tightened when Lucas ran to hug me first, in how her thank yous turned clipped and cold. One Friday evening, she arrived earlier than usual to drop him off. No warning, no text, just the sound of her tires screeching against the curb. When I opened the door, she stood there with Lucas half hidden behind her, his backpack dangling from his shoulder. "Take him," she said sharply. "I have things to do." Lucas stepped forward quietly, eyes down. I could smell alcohol beneath her perfume. "Sophia," I began softly, "are you all right?" She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Of course I'm not all right, Eleanor. You've turned my life into an investigation. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is?" I didn't. "Oh, don't act innocent," she snapped. "You've been spying on me, sending lawyers, making me look like an unfit mother." Her voice trembled, then rose. "You think because you lost your son, you get to take mine too?" Lucas flinched at the volume. I took a slow breath and knelt beside him. "Sweetheart, why don't you go inside and wash up for dinner?" He looked between us, hesitant. "It's okay," I said gently. "Go on." When he was out of sight, Sophia dropped her voice. "You're poisoning him against me." "I'm doing no such thing," I said evenly. "He's a child who needs calm and stability." Her eyes glistened, not with sorrow, but fury barely disguised as tears. "You've always judged me. From the moment James introduced us, you looked at me like I wasn't good enough. Well, maybe you were right. But that doesn't give you the right to take everything." I stayed silent. The stillness seemed to unnerve her more than any argument would have. She stepped closer, her breath sharp and fast. "You think you can win, don't you? That judge gave you 60 days like some kind of favor. But you'll lose, Eleanor. People like me." She paused, almost smiling. "We don't lose." I met her gaze and spoke quietly. "James didn't lose, not really. He saw you, he prepared for this." For the first time, she looked startled, then furious. Her hand twitched, and for a second I thought she might hit me. But instead, she turned away, wiping her eyes dramatically. "You've turned him against me," she whispered again, voice trembling. "Lucas used to run to me. Now he barely looks at me." "He's afraid," I said softly. "You can still change that, Sophia, but not like this." She laughed again, hollow, brittle. "Don't lecture me, Eleanor. You've already stolen my husband's memory, my son's love, and soon my home. What's left for you to take?" "Nothing," I said, simply. "I don't want anything that isn't meant for me." She stood there for a moment, chest rising and falling, eyes darting around, as if looking for an escape from her own fury. Then she turned toward the door, grabbing her bag. "Enjoy your 60 days," she spat. "After that, you'll never see him again." The words hung in the air long after she slammed the door. I sank onto the couch, my body trembling though my face stayed calm. From the hallway, I could hear the sound of running water, Lucas washing his hands, humming softly to himself. That small sound grounded me. When he came out, a hair damp and cheeks pink, he climbed into my lap without a word. I wrapped my arms around him, breathing in the warm, familiar scent of shampoo and safety. "It's okay, Grandma," he whispered. "I like it here." I kissed the top of his head and whispered back, "You're safe, sweetheart, I promise." He smiled faintly, the first real smile in weeks, and leaned against me until he fell asleep. I looked toward the dark window, seeing my reflection, the woman who'd once been broken, now steady as stone. Sophia had finally lost control, but I knew her type too well. Rage was never her ending, only her warning. But Sophia's next move would end the battle for good. The message came on a Wednesday afternoon, short, polite, and unsettling. "We need to talk. Alone. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Riverside Park." Sophia never asked. She demanded. So the fact that she asked told me something had changed. Thomas didn't like it. "She's cornered, Eleanor. Cornered people make reckless moves." "I'll be careful," I promised, "and I won't go alone." The next day, I walked to the park with steady steps, Thomas waiting in a car nearby. The sky hung low, gray and windless, the river slow and dull as steel. Sophia sat on a bench near the water, wrapped in a beige coat, sunglasses hiding her eyes. She looked smaller somehow, not fragile but deflated. When I approached, she didn't stand. "You came." "I did." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she exhaled, voice flat. "I'm leaving, Eleanor." "Leaving?" "Richard's project in Grand Cayman finally cleared," she said, almost businesslike. "We're moving next month, 3 years minimum, maybe longer." I waited. "I wanted to offer you something before that happens." She reached into her bag, pulling out a folded document. "Full custody of Lucas. No more court, no more fighting. You can raise him. I'll send support payments if that helps your conscience." Her tone was smooth, detached, like a CEO announcing a merger, not a mother giving away her child. "You're serious?" I asked quietly. She adjusted her sunglasses. "Completely. He's better off with you. He needs stability, and I can't provide that right now." "You could try," I said gently. She smiled, bitter and tired. "I did, for years, but some of us just aren't built for that kind of life." The honesty in her words was what made them so chilling. There was no guilt, no breakdown, no apology, just acceptance, like she was shedding a responsibility that never truly fit. "What about Lucas?" I asked softly. "Does he know?" She shook her head. "Tell him whatever you want. Say it's temporary, say it's for work. I don't care. He'll be fine." "He'll wonder why." "He always does," she said, standing now, brushing invisible dust from her coat. "You win, Eleanor. That's what you wanted, right?" I looked at her, this woman who had lied, manipulated, fought, and saw something unexpected. Emptiness. Not evil, not rage, just a void where love should have been. "I never wanted to win," I said quietly. "I just wanted him safe." For the first time, her expression faltered. Maybe she understood, maybe not. Either way, she nodded once and turned to leave. As she walked away, I called after her, "Sophia." She paused. "I hope you find peace." Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't look back. "Peace? she repeated softly, like a word she no longer believed in. Then she disappeared down the path. I sat on that bench for a long while, the signed papers heavy in my hands. The river moved slow and certain beside me, its surface unbothered by the wind. When I finally looked up, Thomas was approaching from the car, expression wary. "Well, she's gone," I said simply, "and she's given us everything." He nodded. "Sometimes they do that. They fight until there's nothing left to fight for." I folded the papers carefully, tucking them into my purse. "Sometimes," I murmured, "evil destroys itself. All I had to do was stay still." The wind shifted then, carrying the faint scent of rain, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. 6 months later, the house no longer felt like a place of loss. It felt alive again. Morning light spilled across the kitchen table, where Lucas sat eating breakfast, humming softly as he worked on a science project about constellations. His laughter filled the air, small, bright, unguarded, the sound I'd once thought I might never hear again. He'd grown in those few months, not just taller but steadier. The shadows under his eyes had faded. He smiled more, slept better, talked freely about his father, about school, about the future. Sometimes he even mentioned Sophia, not with anger, just with the distant curiosity children reserve for people who've drifted away. That morning he looked up and grinned. "Grandma, we're learning about stars today. My teacher says we're all made of the same stuff as them." I smiled, cutting fruit for his lunch. "Your dad used to say that too, that every person carries a little light, even on dark days." He nodded seriously. "Then he must be one of the really bright ones." The words caught in my throat. I just reached over and brushed his hair back. He was. After I dropped him at school, I came home to quiet, the kind that felt gentle now, not lonely. Sunlight touched every corner of the living room, where photos of James and Lucas filled the shelves, fishing trips, messy birthdays, smiles that time hadn't managed to erase. That's when I noticed the small brown envelope on the top shelf of the bookcase, one I hadn't opened. It was tucked between family albums, sealed with my son's handwriting. "For Mom, when it's all over." For a long moment, I just held it. My fingers traced the familiar loops of his script, remembering all the notes he'd left over the years, reminders, birthday cards, 1,000 little proofs of his thoughtfulness. My heart raced as I carefully tore it open. Inside was a single page. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means everything is finally settled. I can almost hear you sighing with relief, the way you used to after grading papers late at night. I wish I could have spared you the burden, but I knew you'd carry it with strength and grace, like you've done all your life. Lucas is your light now. Raise him the way you raised me, with patience, laughter, and the belief that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard. He'll grow up to know what love really means because of you. Don't let this chapter define you, Mom. You've spent your whole life taking care of others. Now I want you to live, really live, travel, paint, make new memories. You don't owe the past anything anymore. And whenever you look at the stars, remember, I'm one of them, watching, proud, grateful. Always, James." By the time I finished reading, my tears had blurred the ink. I pressed the letter to my chest, whispering into the stillness, "Oh, James, you've given me everything." Outside, the garden rustled with the soft rhythm of the wind. The rosebush James had planted years ago had begun to bloom again. tender pink petals unfolding toward the sun. I knelt by it, the soil warm beneath my hands, and planted a small wooden marker beside it, for James, who taught us love even in goodbye. That evening, Lucas and I sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset turn the sky gold and lavender. He leaned against me, his small fingers tracing the edge of my sleeve. "Grandma," he said, "do you think Dad can see us from up there?" I smiled through the ache that would probably never leave. "I think he doesn't just see us," I said softly. "I think he guides us." Lucas tilted his head, thoughtful. "Like a star?" "Yes," I whispered. "Exactly like a star." He smiled, satisfied with that answer, and rested his head on my shoulder. The crickets began their evening song. The world felt whole again, not perfect, but whole. In the months that followed, life became a rhythm of small, beautiful things. School mornings, pancake Saturdays, laughter that grew louder with each passing day. I even joined a local art class, something I hadn't done in decades. And for the first time in years, I painted something just for me. Sometimes, when the house was quiet, I'd stand in the garden and look up at the night sky. One particular star always caught my eye. Bright, steady, impossible to ignore. And in those moments, I didn't feel alone, because I knew what James had done. He hadn't just protected us with his will or his foresight. He'd given us something far greater, the chance to rebuild, to love again, to live without fear. As the cool night air brushed against my face, I whispered the words I'd never had the chance to tell him in person, words that still carried every ounce of my heart. My son protected us even after death, and through his will, he taught me how to live again.